Hi guys, it's been a while since we've read The Parker Inheritance, so let's review where we were at in chapter 4. Brandon and Candace were at the library, and Candace had just gone downstairs to use a computer to Google her grandmother getting fired. So I will start at the part right after where she typed in Abigail Caldwell plus Lambert plus fired. The screen filled with links. The first articles were all about how her grandmother had been fired after digging up a tennis court at Vickers Park. The residents were really mad, especially since it seemed like the city didn't have the funds to quickly repair the court. Further down the page is a link to an editorial written in the Lambert Trader by a black city council member who talked about how much of a disappointment her grandmother was to the African American community. Instead of positively showing what a black woman could do as city manager, the politician wrote, Abigail Caldwell's inept and incompetent actions have set back racial progress at least 30 years. Candace quickly closed the webpage without finishing the article. So maybe her grandmother had made a mistake. A huge mistake. But that still didn't give the man the right to talk about her like that. She was sure her grandmother had done good things as city manager too. Candace's time ran out before she could summon the courage to read any more articles. The man at the desk told her she could sign up again and get back in the waiting line, but she decided against it. Candace found her mother, hoping she was ready to go, but her mom was furiously scribbling in a yellow notepad, with piles of books surrounding her at the table. 30 more minutes, her mom said, not looking up. Can't break the flow. She didn't know what her mother had found in the stacks, but it looked like something had kick-started her writing. Candace started back up the stairs, but stopped halfway when she saw Brandon heading toward her. Hey, I was coming down to find you. Already finished? Yeah, I'm done with the internet for today, she said. Then she rubbed her arms. It's kind of cold in here. I'm going to go sit outside. Cool, I'll come with you, he said. I mean, if that's okay? She shrugged. Fine by me. They checked out their books and walked outside. An ice cream truck played Pop Goes the Weasel in the distance. They sat down on a bench. Candace slowly popped her knuckles. She could still see that stupid editorial in her head. Did you know my grandmother? She finally blurted out. Brandon looked up from his book. I only moved to Lambert 3 years ago, but Granddad knew her pretty well. He's lived here for like 20 years. He moved here after he retired. Candace wondered what Brandon's grandfather thought of her grandma. Did he see her as a disgrace? A failure? Do you know where Vickers Park is? She asked. And there's tennis courts there? Brandon stuck a finger in his book to save his place. Is this about your grandmother getting fired from her job with the city? Candace's shoulders sank. How do you know about that? I thought you just moved here. As my granddad says, word travels fast and lingers long in the South. He said she got a raw deal. He shifted on the bench. Vickers Park is in Vista Heights. It's not too far from PJ's. Candace rifled through her bag, trying to decide what to read, then glanced at Brandon. He had returned to his book, his mouth moving a little as he read line by line. She couldn't tell what book he had opened, but it wasn't the Judy Blume one. At his suggestion, she had checked out all the books with girl main characters, and he had checked out books featuring boys. She had kept her mouth shut, this time. Hey, I'm sorry, can I ask you another question? She asked. He looked up again. Do you know why she was fired? He wrinkled his nose. The rumor is that she thought something was hidden underneath the court. So much for confidentiality. She decided to press further. And, do you know what she was looking for? No, but maybe Mom or Granddad knows. When I get home I can ask. That's okay, Candace quickly said. Her mom was right. She didn't want to talk to anyone else about her grandmother's hunt for buried treasure, especially other adults. She didn't want to make her grandma's reputation worse. Really, he said, it's no, just forget it. It all sounded too silly, especially now that she was talking about it with someone other than her mother. She couldn't see why her grandmother lost her job. I feel totally stupid even bringing it up. Sure thing, he said. Then almost 5 minutes later, while still looking at his book, he said, for what it's worth, I don't think you're stupid. I mean, stupid people don't read all 5 books in the Dark is Rising sequence, right? He paused and then added, I bet stupid people don't even call it a sequence. Candace waited for him to continue, but he just flipped the page and went back to reading. She smiled. Brandon was a book snob, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Chapter 5. Candace stretched out on the couch with her eyes glued to her dad's old iPod Touch, and her feet tucked underneath a frayed throw pillow. A couple of unread library books sat on the coffee table beside her. She considered herself a die-hard book nerd, but she realized even she needed a break after doing nothing but reading for the past 4 days. So instead, Candace jammed her earbuds in her ears, cranked up one of her dad's playlists, and opened up her Mental Twister app. It was pretty crappy as far as logic and puzzle games were concerned, but nowhere near as good as the games on her old desktop. It was better than not playing anything at all, though. She had just started a new round when she felt her earbuds being yanked away. Way too loud, her mother loomed over her. I've called you 3 times. Candace jolted up, kicking the pillow on the floor. She could still hear Stevie Wonder's My Cherry Amour coming through the buds in her mother's hand. Sorry, The doorbell rang. Her mom dropped the earbuds and crossed the room to open the door. Hey, Brandon, she said, her voice still loud. Come on in. She turned back around. New rule. The next time you play your iPod that loud, I'm taking it. She frowned at Candace one last time, then marched out. Candace could feel the heat spreading on her neck. Her father would have never yelled at her like that in front of other kids. Are you busy, Brandon? Was considerate enough to look at the floor instead of her. I can come back. No, it's fine. She crossed her arms and pinched her sides. It helped her to forget about her mom's hard work. Her mom hated being interrupted when she was on a roll with her writing, and she'd been pulling an 18-hour day since they'd come back from the library. She only stopped for bathroom breaks and to scarf down canned vegetable soup and peanut butter sandwiches. Candace was regretting not ever learning how to cook on her own. I was thinking we could trade books, Brandon said. You already finished all 10 of yours? I'm a quick reader. He looked at the iPod sitting on the couch. How can you read and listen to music at the same time? I wasn't reading. I was playing a game. She turned off her iPod. I used the music as background noise. It's super quiet in here. Exactly, Candace thought. Give me a second. I'll grab the books from my room. By the time she returned, Brandon had stacked his boy books on the coffee table. She wondered if he'd actually finished all 10 of them, or if he had only pretended to read them. Brandon began stuffing her books in his bag. I've already read some of these, but I don't mind reading them again, he said. Did you have a chance to finish Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret? I've read it like 10 times, but I still love it. Yeah, I know, Candace said. It's a really good book. Have you read any other books by Judy Blume? Candace nodded, which Brandon took as permission to talk about seemingly every other book the author had written. Candace stood there as he went on and on. It was obvious he wanted to talk, but she wasn't in the mood right then. Okay, he finally said. I guess I'll go now? He paused like he was waiting for her to respond. Candace just replied, See you later. He nodded, then smiled. Remember, don't play that music too loud. Candace didn't know if he was teasing her or being serious. Either way, she didn't like it. See you, she said. She began to rearrange the stack of books on the coffee table. Brandon must have gotten the hint because he spun around and went out the door. She switched the iPad back on and turned down the volume. The Temptations came on next. That was another bad thing about not having a computer or Wi-Fi. Not only was she cut off from her video games and email, she also didn't have any way to listen to new music. She was stuck with whatever was on her dad's iPod, which shuffled between slightly dated and extremely ancient. She started a new round of her game. Then the doorbell chimed again. Candace, will you? I've got it, Mom, she yelled. She removed the earbuds and crossed the room, the iPod still in her hand. It was probably Brandon again. She pulled the door open. What happened to you? Brandon's shirt was covered with leaves and grass, and 2 red scratches lined his face. He quickly nodded behind him. 3 boys on bikes sat at the edge of the yard, right beside the holy bush. One boy pointed at them, and all 3 laughed. Can I come in? Brandon whispered. Please? Candace opened the door a little wider to let him in. The boy closest to them said something loud and nasty. She pretended not to hear it. I knew I should have waited before coming over. Brandon leaned against the wall, looking smaller than he had moments before. I saw them riding their bikes, but I thought they were going to the Y. They must have just been circling the block. Who are they? Kids from school. They started picking on me a month ago. Then school ended. Candace understood exactly what he meant. Being bullied on the final day of school was like being the last one holding the ball in a game of hot potato. Except the ball was a really big X on your back, and the game wouldn't start again until all the kids came back in August. She looked out the window. The boys had pedaled down the street. They're leaving. He peered out as well. Okay, hopefully they're not just circling the block again. He placed his hand on the doorknob. How bad do I look? You're bleeding a little, Candace said, studying his face. Want a Band-Aid? I'll be okay, he shrugged. A few scratches for a full bag of books. Sounds like a fair trade. She laughed, but quickly stopped. She couldn't tell if Brandon was joking or not. He was hard to read, like all those dry British comedians her father liked. Then Brandon smiled, so she figured it was okay to smile too. You risk life and death for books that you've already read? You must be really bored. It was either that or spend another night watching the Braves with Granddad, and I hate baseball. The mention of the Atlanta Braves tugged something inside Candace. She and her father usually went to a few games during the summer. It would be crazy hot, and hot dogs were often hit or miss. But it was something they always did, just him and her. She'd given up hope of it happening this year. What's wrong, he asked. How had she looked right then? Nothing, She shook her head. Hey, do you want to check the attic? My mom thinks my grandma might have some old books up there. I'm sure we could find something you haven't read yet. He nodded as he slipped off his backpack. That would be great. We're going to stop right there because next is chapter 6. And my question for you is, what do you think Candace and Brandon will find in her grandmother's attic besides books?